I just want to say thank you, man, because like the time like I've spent with you and the way that you've presented your country has been such a cool experience. And I think, I mean, and I noticed this like the first time I met you and we sat down, you have so much, like you have a wealth of knowledge and you're so curious about your country and sharing like the history of it and what's going on now and sharing these special places within Albania, which I was fortunate enough to take part in as well. And I guess sort of an idea that's been tumbling around in my mind in general is being able to work with people as much as possible. And I guess I kind of wanted to explore that maybe specifically within the setting of Albania, because of course communism ended roughly 30 years ago, and this idea of being able to create a business, it's a new idea again. And working with people to create things in this place, I think it's cool to see that energy. I've spoken to a lot of people that are doing things such as yourself, and moving forward and navigating all of that. I mean, I guess I don't know exactly if I have a specific question to ask you, but that's sort of like the where my curiosity is, if you want to explore that area.
Yeah, that's Albania in general, as we also discussed, is a very weird place to do business, for example. And when I say to do business, I mean any kinds of working with other people. I'm not talking creating the next Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking more small scale, either family owned or whatever, but not the huge corporations that you guys get in the US. So, economically speaking, we're maybe 100 years behind you, maybe even a bit more behind you, because you guys have explored free markets way before us. So, probably since the founding of the US.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that case, Albania is still very new to that thing. We're doing some of the same mistakes that you guys did back in the days, and we're doing other places, we're figuring them out.
Mm-hmm.
So, hope it goes well.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess sort of intertwined with these corporations is corruption. I mean, there's corruption all over the world, and in the States, I think it happens more at a higher level, where these bigger companies have the financial capacity to hire teams and teams of lawyers and lobbyists and whatever else to get their way. And I don't know exactly how that would work in Albania, but it seems like corruption might be a little bit more accessible or lower level. Do you think that's true?
Yes, it is. And, well, in the US, it's actually quite easy. You just call it lobbying and pay taxes on it, and it's legal.
Yes.
In many ways.
Yes.
And there are some million different discussions for lobbying and against lobbying, and don't want to take a stance on any of them because I don't have the necessary information to take a stance on them. But yeah, we do the same thing via corruption in our country, and it's more accessible, but it's getting less accessible every day. And there is a strong push at government level, especially with initiatives like e-Albania, where our government platform, where everything is getting digitized right now, to also fight corruption through that. Now, if they will actually fight corruption through that, or if they will just centralize corruption, that's another story entirely. And from the stories I'm hearing, they're more like centralizing the corruption and are really fighting it. But police, for example, at least in bigger cities, all have body cameras. So you'll get stopped on a traffic stop. You cannot really just give them money to get away with stuff because they have body cameras, it'll be on camera, you might end up in prison, the cop will end up in prison if they accept that. So they are doing something to fight corruption, but again, I don't know to what extent that is fighting corruption and to what extent that would be centralizing corruption into fewer and fewer hands.
Yeah.
By the looks of it, is more the former. They're, well, In a way, I guess they are fighting corruption as well, but it's also to a large degree that they are centralizing corruption. We've had corruption scandals with doctors, we've had corruption scandals with everyone here in Albania, so no one is immune to that.
How can you be prone to corruption as a doctor? What
As
does
a
that mean?
doctor, there's not enough medical capacity for everything, so you take in some money to get someone a surgery quicker, for example.
Okay. So you put them in front of the top
put
of the
them
list. for a ride.
And this is a very mild case of corruption. There's many other cases, and I don't want to necessarily go into that very deeply. But you can imagine,
And I guess-
not almost to the point of denying people medical care in case they don't pay. Not yet, but we might end up there one day if we screw it up.
So that's what I was wondering is, like, what is the effect of corruption, of being in a society soaked in corruption?
Many different effects, and they start from the very smallest one, that when you get a traffic stop or the taxman comes knocking at the door or whatever, whoever it is that you have to work with on a government level, a lot of those people are even surprised that you actually know the laws, because so many people just give them the money, whatever it is they need, they get it sorted the old school way, and no need to read the law, no need to do anything legally as long as you have deep enough pockets. And yeah, we sometimes get people calling from tax offices and they don't even understand what we're doing with declarations, and then we have to teach them what we're doing, and then in the end it's okay, but it's time consuming. Whereas the easiest choice would be, here's your money, buy.
Yeah.
I pay
And it's
zero
easier for them
taxes.
too.
Yeah, it's easier for them too, and it's easier for everyone. And the same with police.
Yeah.
There's stuff where traffic police will stop you, you're in the right, they don't even understand the law themselves, so you have to discuss the law with them. And in the end of the day, it's fine, but you can just hand them $50 and say goodbye, and you'll not lose an hour with a lecture. So that's also a problem. But then also it's the problem doing business, for example, because you're trying to do business, you're trying to be an honest taxpayer.
If possible, you don't need to play anything.
It's just for
Follow me, Davey.
moving pictures.
Okay, I didn't know if he was going to put music on for us.
And yeah, in a business sense, for example, you try to be an honest tax-paying citizen, and then in the end of the day, someone comes and he gets a lower bid than you, and he gets the client because he pays no taxes, and then he pays 2% of what he would otherwise have paid in corruption money, or 5% or 10%, whatever. He has much lower costs in that way.
So it makes it harder to compete.
So it makes it harder to compete in many ways. Or you get stuff like dirty money that's being laundered, and of course that's being laundered through corruption, because you have to have a network of people who aren't very clean to launder your money. You have to have that at the banking level, you have to have that at the government level, you have to have that at everything, at the accountant that does it for you. So they will also outcompete you, because they have no problem at all just operating at a loss for a year just to gain market. Money has no value to them, especially if you're laundering it.
Yeah. Well, and it means that corners are cut as well.
Yeah.
Like we were seeing with the bridge, which was amazing that it was 3 months ago where you were saying it was level.
Yeah.
And then the road has sunk where the bridge has remained, and
Yeah.
we're talking like a 5-centimeter sink.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is not insignificant.
It's probably more than 5 centimeters even, because the road was opened officially on the 1st of July or 30th of June, something around that time period.
Okay.
And
Wow.
yeah, from then until now, it's 2.5, 3 months, and the road has sunk quite a bit. And of course it has sunk a bit because that used to be wetlands that was later dried. But on the other hand, you have 100 plus story buildings that are built in Dubai in the middle of the sea, and they don't sink. Then you have the same thing. You have a huge percentage of the Netherlands, the entire country was built in the sea hundreds of years ago with old technology, and that thing doesn't sink.
Yeah.
And you have Singapore, and it also is one of the craziest roads in one of the most expensive roads in Europe per kilometer to build. And of course, if you're going to steal something as a contractor, it'll be the invisible things. So the structure that's actually below the road that compacts all the soil and all that stuff, that's the thing you're going to steal at and maybe not do it as good.
Yeah.
Because it's invisible, and how will you see that? You cannot
can't
just
prove it
open the
until
road
afterward.
to prove it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you could be like, yeah, well, we did it, but it just kept sinking. Like,
Yeah, it just kept sinking.
There's no.
Yeah, human error.
Proof,
Engineering.
Yeah.
Engineering did something wrong. Human error. Sorry. Or this was an impossible project. The data that we had from the geological survey wasn't correct, and
Well, and so now it's making me curious. Like all these half-finished buildings that are everywhere across Albania, like the concrete structures, are those like old and were just given up on, or are those projects that were invested into and went bankrupt? What is going on there? Because there's so many of them.
there's a bit of everything, of course, but most of what you see, I would put that in two different categories. One of them is big high-rises. They're not unfinished because of they don't have money or anything. They're unfinished because they are being built, and they're actually being built at quite a quick pace, a lot quicker than you guys are building anything in the US, to be sure. But they looked unfinished because, yeah, they take 4 or 5 years to build, but there's so much stuff being built right now that it gives the false impression that something has been left unfinished on purpose.
Because you don't really see people working on them all the time. Like I feel like
Depends, yeah.
For the most part, I guess what I've seen is they're just standing there,
Yeah.
and
Well,
sometimes you see like lots of rain, or I don't know like what led me to the conclusion of it, but it does seem like it's just left there.
Well, the ones in Tirana, sometimes they work on the inside and you cannot really see them. Sometimes they work on the outside. Sometimes they're with the skeleton crew because they move the crew somewhere else, and it's just construction. And I don't really have the knowledge to comment on how they are doing it. But what you can see in Tirana is that in the last few years, with the big high-rises, there's huge changes, and they just pop out of nowhere, basically. So if you were here 5 years ago and if you're here now, the skyline looks different completely. Now, the second category is probably the smaller buildings that you see, 2-3 stories. They have the rebar sticking out of the top. That's completely different then. That's mostly buildings that are built as a private initiative to be someone's house, to be someone's business. And that's a very conscious decision by the people that build it, to build whatever they can afford in the first phase, and then just leave the rebar sticking out, leave the second place unfinished, and once they've earned enough money, they'll add a floor. And it's quite normal in Albania because banks don't work as well as they do in the US. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, once you have gathered enough cash, you build a good foundation that can support, let's say, 4-story building, and then you build only 1 floor, and then you leave the rebar hanging, or you just do the concrete
for a year, 2
first.
years,
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah, however much time you need to make the rest of the money.
So you
People
can buy
aren't-
it in
yeah.
cash.
Yeah, so you can do it in cash. You could technically take out a loan, but loans here in Albania aren't very fair, let's say. Or even if they are fair, the rates are just crazy, so people don't buy them. Plus, there's also a healthy or unhealthy, I'm not able to judge that, but there's a distrust towards banks, coming from our history with pyramid schemes that we had in 1997 and everything. And people don't generally trust financial institutions that much.
And just to, I know you mentioned it to me a little bit, So from what I remember, everyone was assuming that they could double their money within a year, or
Yeah.
they were promised these crazy
Yeah.
things, and so everyone was taking their life savings out
Yeah.
and throwing it into these
Yeah.
schemes, and everyone got busted.
Yeah,
basically.
everyone was liquidating as much as they could and were putting money into these schemes. And yeah, people were naive. They've never heard of the free market before that. And they've never heard of capitalism or banks or finance or anything. So they didn't, and information also wasn't available like it is right now with internet, by the way. You had to go to a library and maybe get a book if they had something on finance. And then you'd read that book, and then you'd need to read 50 other books to get a general idea, whereas now you can watch 5 YouTube videos and know that that's a scam.
Yeah.
But back then it was much easier to scam people with that kind of thing. And it was also people were also prone to being scammed, I would say, because during communist times and immediately after, people got this idea that everything in the West, it's easy money, you just work, you get money, you have a good life, quite the opposite of communism. And in many ways it is the opposite of communism. But when you come from such a dark place, the opposite of such a dark place looks like heaven. And you're prone to believe when someone comes and tells you, hey, this is how the world works, this is how finance works, you just do this and you get free money and you don't need to work and anything. When you come from a place that's very close to hell, it's very easy to fall for that kind of scam, I would say.
Yeah. Because, I mean, there's just no knowledge of how money is made.
Yeah, there's no knowledge, but there's also hope. There's hope for something a lot better. And that hope is, in many ways, it's so huge that it's also unsubstantiated.
Well, people saw what they want in that case.
Yeah, and people really believe that it's actually like that. That if you invest some money, work a little bit, then you end up getting free money all the time. And you don't need to work anymore, and it's paradise.
Well, I guess as a country, you guys learned that lesson fairly quickly then, because
Yeah.
you went super
Yeah.
far in that direction and
Yeah.
then got course corrected. So now you're saying there's no in between of getting a reasonable loan.
The trust is just not there with banking institutions, and it's starting to develop. When I first entered business, no one, that was 11, 12 years ago, no one wanted bank transfers. We would have to pay, even bigger groups would have to pay everything in cash because no one trusted banks for a transfer. Now it's getting better and better when it comes to trust with banks. Also, online banking is starting to work quite well because, of course, 10 years ago there was very little online banking anywhere in the world, let alone in Albania. Now they are starting to work a bit better, of course. And yeah, bank transfers are still not cheap. They're still quite expensive compared to places in the EU, for example. But they're a lot better than they used to be. And for example, we were able to, a lot of the expensive, to just pay by bank transfer, which for us is a big deal, because we don't want our guys to walk around with this thick of a wad of cash with them.
Yeah.
They're just a target.
Yeah.
And especially when you're in the mountains, sleeping with 5 other guys, there's a bunch of people there, it's always stress, and we don't want to take that stress off our people, of course.
Yeah.
So for us, it's a big deal switching to banks, but it takes quite a lot of pushing and pulling to get all the suppliers to do that as well. Because first of all, they don't trust banks. Then we have the problem that even the ones that do kind of trust banks, they have no bank close to where they live. So they have to take the car and drive half an hour to get the money out of the bank. They have no ATM, no anything where they live in the villages, which is also another barrier. Then is the general distrust of banking institutions here in Albania, which means that, yeah, it's hard.
Well, I think there's also an important distinction. You're talking about these more remote villages versus Tirana. I mean, that's a completely different world.
Yeah.
So, in these villages, do you think these changes that are maybe being seen in Tirana are happening in a slower way, or are they sort of remaining more traditional in a certain sense?
Among the young population, they are happening quite quickly. But the thing is, and I can't remember who said that quote, but people don't change their mind. People just die and are replaced by younger people. And that's the thing with Albanian villages as well, of course, that the older generation, they are still using an old phone that they don't know how to use really, and that's their extent of knowledge about technology. Whereas the younger generation, they're more used to technology, they're more used to card payment or to banking in general, so they are also more prone to use that. But on the other hand, they're moving out of the villages. So it is changing at a much slower pace than in Tirana. Of course, because this is a big city with 1 million people and whatnot. So change here happens quicker. But we'll have to see what will happen with the villages and with immigration, of course. At this rate, we'll be out of people in 40 years anyway.
What do you mean out of people?
We have, the last census was in 2011, and then the next one at 2023. And we went from 3 million to 2.4 million in that time frame.
Oh.
So yeah, you do the math. You do the math. In 40 years, there'll be no one left here, if that trend continues, or if it accelerates.
And have you felt that?
Yeah. From a business point of view, very much, because there's no one left that's willing to work. And our Prime Minister, in his infinite wisdom, once had a quote that said, "There's enough jobs, there's just not professionals." And back when he said it, you might want to argue that there's people, but they're not willing to work, or they're not capable of working well. At this moment, there's just no more people left who are going to work. There's just a shortage of human power.
Wow. So, I mean, obviously, because I assume that would be true with the farming and the villages, because people want to move away from the villages, but the country in general, is that young people? Is that people your age? I mean, I think another thing that's important to note is, like, your generation is the boomer generation for Albania.
Yeah.
After communism fell, that's when everyone was like, let's have children. So most people are, at around 30 years old. Is it this generation that's fleeing, may you say, or is it older generation, the newer generation?
Well, fleeing, first of all, is a
Okay, yeah, that's a loaded word. I'm sorry.
That's a loaded word.
But I guess flooding away. I mean, because it's so drastic.
They're leaving the country in huge numbers.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's mostly the young generation that's doing it, so 30 and younger generally, or let's say everyone born after 1985 maybe and later. So people who went to very early childhood during communism, where pretty much they don't remember anything. And people who were born after it that are leaving, and also very, very young people. We're talking 18-year-olds as well that are leaving, because there's this promise that in the West especially, you'll work and everything is a carpet of flowers, and you'll just work a bit and get some money and get some assistance from the government. There was a big thing with people during the big refugee wave, also people from Albania just going to Germany and taking the assistance money until they were kicked out, and they could live well enough. And yeah, it's in our history, I would say, because a lot of the villages you saw, they were built with money from people that went abroad, worked there, returned, and then invested something in their home country. The only hope is now that people will return again and invest in their home country, of course. If they do, then this would be just a phase like an adolescent growing up. If they don't, then there's no other word than we're screwed.
Wow. That really is kind of like very shocking to me that that Albania has shrunk this much, especially in contrast to what we were talking about with the construction. Because infrastructure-wise, it's going crazy up, but then people-wise, is that because of it's like infrastructure for tourism, but not for or like? Do you know what's going on there?
No, most of it is actually not for tourism. There's very little data about this kind of thing, but some of it is for money laundering, of course, because a lot of money you use, maybe even most of it is for money laundering, but that's just a guess, not even an educated guess, because I don't have the data to back it up. But there's a few business magazines, and they do a few studies here in Albania, and sometimes they say half is empty, sometimes they say more than half is empty. But yeah, some of it is money laundering, of course, which means that it doesn't really matter if they're empty or not. That's what happens in New York with the $25 million penthouses, by the way. Yeah. It's the same thing. It's not, it seems to be a universal in most countries anyway. Some of it is tourism, but I would say a very, very small component of that would be tourism compared to what money laundering is. And the other thing is also that quite a lot of people have some money that they have already cleaned up, or that was clean in the beginning, and people are not very confident in the purchasing power of the Albanian lek, even though it's growing. People are not very confident. They might be waiting for a crash or something, and they say, yeah, just buy something in concrete, an apartment or something, and money can go up and down, but an apartment will always be valuable.
Okay.
But an interesting statistic to watch is always the rate between new construction, so new apartments that are being built, and household formation. So basically new couples that are getting married. And in the US, when the 2008 crisis hit, don't quote me on this, by the way, I need to check the numbers to know correctly, but it was something like 2.2, something around that they were building 2.2 times as much primary household units as there were households being formed. And they say that this is a very good indicator of a real estate market crash.
Yeah.
We're at something around 8. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
You're building 8 times as much as couples are being formed.
Yeah. And some of that, of course, is people moving into the city, so that is offset in that direction as well. Because you guys in the US maybe didn't have that much in 2008, but yeah, you get the idea. And this is also just official statistics with how many building permits they have given in the last few years and how many marriages there are. So this isn't the proper study, it's just me playing around with at the Statistics Bureau and downloading Excel spreadsheets. So, of course, don't quote me on this on anything important. But it's scary. Even if it's half that, it's scary.
Yeah. Do you think Albania culturally would be willing to accept immigrants as a way to solve this problem?
It's hard to say, because the Albanian culture is a very unique culture in its own. And traditionally, and I'm not saying just about Albania, but anywhere in the Balkans, that there are generally more closed cultures that we would probably accept someone who speaks the language. Okay. And traditionally, in the Balkans in general, Albanians have been the ones that identify via language. So if you speak the language, you're Albanian and you'll be fine here. But if you don't speak the language, you'll probably not do that. And there seems to be a push from the government-wise, that if you go around Tirana, you see quite a lot of posters that are hanging, that are either made from the government or whatever, the kind of cycle safely kind of deal, you know, or public service announcements or that kind of thing. They're always in English and in Albanian, and very often English is the first language and Albanian the second language. This might be a conscious push. This, for whatever reason, I don't know. It could be for this reason, could be for another reason entirely. But I think that if you don't speak the language, you'll still be welcoming in the sense that, yeah, you can work in Tirana or whatever, but you're less likely to be welcome here than you are, or in wherever else in the Balkans, by the way, including Greece, than you would be in England or Germany or France or wherever.
Really?
Or the US, yeah. Because in the end of the day, you have to speak the language. If you don't speak the language fluently, you're not one of us. And if you don't speak the language fluently, and if you're not one of us, let's put it this way, we know that when the next war breaks out, you'll start off to wherever you came from. So you're not one of us. And in the end of the day, we live in a country and in an area where there's been pretty much non-stop war since humans have been here. And we're living through a short bit of peace right now, but everyone's aware that it might someday end. So, yeah, we want a more united society. And Albania, by the way, is one of the most homogeneous countries in the world when it comes to ethnicity. So, hard to say.
Yeah.
Albanians generally are very welcoming. We could use the Kosovo refugee crisis as an example, but that might be...
Because they're Albanian.
They're Albanian. They speak the same language.
And they're
So
ethnically
yeah.
Albanian too.
So for that reason, it might be a very incorrect example to take. But almost 1 million people came within a few weeks into a country of 3 million.
Yeah.
So you get the idea. That's a huge crisis at a time where we didn't have enough food for the 3 million that were living here.
Wow.
So that was a big crisis, and people opened up their homes and took refugees into their homes. As far south as Elbasan, it was every home that had enough space. And a bit further south, it was still quite a lot of homes did.
Wow.
And in the north, it was everyone. Didn't matter if they had space or not. They just took you in, and you'd sleep in the kitchen or in the wherever on the floor.
This is like 25 years ago?
This is 99, yeah, so 25 years ago.
Wow.
So you could say that, but on the other hand, we also took in quite a lot of Jewish refugees during the Second World War and helped hiding them. And they didn't integrate into society at all because everyone knew the war was going to end one day and they would be gone. It was just the humane thing to do. And it was also the traditional thing to do, that if a guest knocks at your door, you take them in and you protect them.
And not just for the short term?
Not just for until they need protection.
Wow.
Because they're a guest, and that's the whole point of being a good host. So during that time, people forged papers, gave them Albanian names, sometimes Muslim Albanian names, very often actually, until the war ended, and then everyone went off to Israel or to wherever they came from. And then, yeah, Albania did play a part in the protection, I would say, of the Jewish refugees at the time of war, which is also recognized by the Israeli parliament. If you want to check that.
Interesting.
Fact, yeah.
Well, you mentioned something, and this is an idea or something that I've been observing just as I've been traveling, is what it means to be a good host.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. So you would define being a good host, or in an Albanian way, a good host is someone who, I'm just paraphrasing sort of what you're saying, someone who provides whatever the guest needs, or how would you define that?
Basically someone who, in a very, very simplified way, someone who would provide in the same way that you would provide for your family, you'd provide for someone else who is in your home. For anything you need. Safety, which is always the first. Even though we now live in a modern world where we are generally safe and we think we take it for granted, let's put it this way. It hasn't always been that way, so that's the first thing. Safety from the elements, very first one, from the winter, from the rain, from the heat, from everything. Food, so that you have something to eat, to the point where very often guests would be the ones that eat the most at the home. and not the family. And it's guests, it's then the family, and then it's the man of the house. That's the last one that maybe gets something to eat. 2, physical safety. If they are attacked and you take them in, then you have to protect them. And there's actually a story about this, and I don't know how correct that story is, but it's very widely known here. We had these blood feuds back in the days, where if you killed someone, you end up in a blood feud until that is resolved by the village elders, and it takes some time for that to be resolved. But we also have the problem that have the good thing about being good hosts. So what happened one day is that just a random guy knocks at a house, and he is taken in, and at that house someone had just killed the son, and it happened that it was this guy that was taken in as a guest. So the man of the house at the time took him in as a guest, later learned that the guest was actually the one that killed his son, and said, "Here you are, my guest, you're at home, you are safe. Once you leave, I'll give you a day, then I'll go and hunt you. But I'll not kill you in my house because you are my guest here in my house and I cannot touch you, and I'll have to protect you here in my house."
Whoa.
Yeah, and when the guest left, then he gave him a day and then went after him.
And did he get him?
Don't know. And I don't know how true the story is, but Albanians are very strict with these traditions and have always been very strict. Now it's kind of getting watered down in some cases, but still are a lot stricter than most other European people, I would say. So it's very believable, to the Albanian mind at least. And I don't know if he got them or if he even really looked after him or went searching or let him go or whatever.
Yeah.
But the part is told as a true story generally.
Gotcha. And is that seen as like is that told because these principles should be embodied?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And to the point where there's another story, and this is actually a true story, that they even found the German officer back in the day from this story, and that was, I think, some Albanian TV channel found a guy 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. And there was an Albanian family that had taken in a Jewish family, and the Germans knew, the Nazis knew. So the Nazis lined everyone up in that entire family and said, "Okay, who's the Jew here? Come out and I'll spare the family." And no one would come out. "Come out and I'll spare the family," and repeated it a few times. And then the youngest son of the father who owned the family came, walked and said, "I'm the Jew." And he got executed on the spot because he said, "I'll protect the guests."
The youngest son.
Yeah. And they interviewed an Albanian TV station interviewed the Nazi officer later off camera, and it was put in a newspaper in writing. So I don't know how correct that is with everything that's going on with journalism, but I'm inclined to believe it. And the German officer said that we knew very well that he wasn't the Jew, but I was so impressed by his act that I kind of granted his wishes.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, that's what you do, you die.
But it's interesting, so this idea that in Albania it's the man of the house, the oldest man eats last, and then in this situation it was the youngest son.
And that's not just Albania, that's everywhere. Really, if you want to go, all traditional societies in most, probably in case of most Abrahamic religions, really, because I hear the same thing happen in the US all the time with more traditional and rural families, that the father's always the last one to eat. And that's the same thing here, of course, it's the same thing. The man of the house he's the one who's responsible for feeding anyone else, so if there's no food left for him, bad luck. Work hard or get more food next time, maybe. Yeah, life's hard.
It's just interesting, right? Because it's that equation of survival as a family, right? So you have your family unit, and as the man of the house, in most cases, you're the most valuable in terms of bringing resources into the family. In many cases, and that's why the male role traditionally is seen as the provider role.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting that if you don't provide enough, then you don't have enough for yourself. Even because I wonder how far that would go, because if you take that too far, then if you can't get anything, then as the provider you die, right? If, you take it to the complete extreme, you would die, and then there would be no provider.
Yeah.
And then, so, I don't know, it's interesting to think why that has evolved. Maybe it's motivation in a certain sense, or it's like you can't...
It's maybe even biblical.
Compassion?
It's maybe even biblical. It's compassion, but biblically you'd say that the order that everything works in a household or in a family is God, husband, wife, children, in this order. But it's also up, down from there. So when it comes to feeding, you always feed the children first, and then you feed your wife, and then after your wife, you end up feeding yourself with whatever is left. And maybe that's evolved because of motivation, but
or maybe it is survival, because if you die as the oldest male, then there's still children that can grow up.
Yeah, that can grow, and your bloodline survives. Yeah. And the oldest son would generally be the one then who takes up your role. And that's very pronounced. And I think it's not just Albanian, but it's anywhere in the world really that when the father goes somewhere for work, he goes to the oldest son and says, "You're now the man of the house. Goodbye." And he goes for work a few days, and then he comes back, and during that time you're the man of the house. And I don't think that's even just Albanian, that's everywhere.
Yeah,
really.
that is everywhere.
Yeah,
for
you're
sure.
the man of the house.
Yeah.
So now it's your turn to provide safety.
And now it's interesting how that relationship as a family connects to like a community. Would you say, like traditionally in Albania, it's more like nuclear families separated, or are these communities maybe in these villages where these families maybe not exactly like cohabitating, but sharing resources and living more collectively? Do you see that?
Well, you guys in the West would probably call it like a clan, but I don't think I don't know.
Village or community.
Yeah,
community is the best word for it.
Yeah. Well, even community isn't a very good word for it, because they're all somehow related. And we use the term family, and we use the term fis, which means extended family, if you like. Because you take care of your family, and then with the excess resources that you create, or rather, you take care of your immediate family, your wife and children, and then with the excess resources that you create, you take care of your brothers and sisters' families, and then if you create more excess resources than that, you go to cousins and go down and down and down the scale. So it's all family related, not necessarily village related.
Okay, and then would families live together? Like would your family members, would your cousins and your brothers and sisters be your neighbors, or would you all be on the same
very
property?
Often, very often, yeah. So you would generally you'd share maybe the same property, for example. You see in a few villages, or even in more developed areas, you see houses that have 2 or 3 stories. That's because the father had 3 sons. Traditionally, the wife moves in with the husband here in Albania. So the father has 3 sons. So he builds a building with 3 floors. And there's a staircase that's outside the building. Almost always when you see the staircase that's outside the building, it was at least the original intent for it to be 3 different families living in 3 different floors of the same building, that they have privacy and access to each of the floors, of course, but there's still the 3 brothers.
Yeah, and everyone's still together.
Yeah, and
so
the
it's
father
enough separation, but enough
it's
connection.
Enough separation, but enough connection that the children can all play with each other.
Yeah.
You grow up with your cousins who all share similar values.
Makes it easier to raise the kids if you have other parents.
Makes it much easier to raise the kids because you don't need a nanny.
Yeah.
because you're three families.
Yeah.
And you have
Someone's
the
gonna be home.
grandparents.
Yeah,
Yes,
someone's
someone's
gonna
going to
be
be home all the time.
Yeah.
So it makes it much easier to raise the kids. You kind of share the same values. It helps with grounding each other. It'll be unlikely that all families will have children at the same time, so you can also share duties in that way. Because
there's different challenges
Yeah,
at
there's
different
different
ages.
challenges and different ages, and of course the parents will live somewhere in that building as well. So different challenges. The parents, which are now grandparents, they will have the most experience in raising, so they will
And they'll
trickle
probably be at
down
home the
that
most
experience.
because they're not
they-
working.
They're working less, so
Yeah, working less.
they will be at home. They'll have time for that experience. There'll be enough time for the experience to trickle down to the younger generations. And then there's three separate families raising children almost together. Of course, they're all separate from each other. And of course, there's, like anywhere in the world, there's the family dynamics within the family and with the brothers and with the cousins and with everything else that are, sometimes they're perfect, sometimes they're not. But generally in Albania, they're very close. You don't generally move out once you're 18. Whereas in a lot of places in the Western world, you're almost kicked out once you're 18,
Yeah.
figuratively speaking at least.
Or I think, this lack of community, even if it is just within extended family,
Yeah.
this mesh, I think maybe is less prevalent, and separated nuclear families.
Yeah.
And so there's maybe there's internal pressure from parents or whatever, but I think external pressure as well, just as an individual, at least in the States, to get the fuck out and
Yeah.
to get into the world.
Yeah.
Because the house, the parents' home feels like
Yeah.
like a
Safe.
nest or something, but like you're not really connected to the world. Like
Yeah.
and I guess it's just hard to balance those two things, right? Having that sanctuary while also still being connected to the
Yeah.
world and being able to learn.
Yeah. Well, here I would say in both places and probably everywhere else, it's the call to adventure that you have, especially as a young guy. And I cannot talk about the young women because I have never been one. But as a young guy, you do have that call to adventure, to let's do something crazy with the boys. And in a very safe, I would say, society where everything is provided for you. You just pay some money and you get anything you ever wanted, and you just have to work a bit. Like it's the US, you just work, earn money, and everything is open and provided to you.
Yeah.
Whereas traditionally, at least in Albania, the call to adventure, what are you talking about? You take the sheep to the mountain. That's enough adventure over there. You'll probably get a few encounters with wolves over there. Yeah, you have the dogs, but you also have your gun, but you also might have 15 wolves that are coming for you. Or you might get encounters with bears or with bad weather or with difficult terrain. So you get your adventures in different ways. And then there's, of course, immigration. And I would hazard a guess in saying that part of what this immigration is people looking for an adventure. It's not just people wanting to leave the country. It's also people looking for an adventure, because the country itself, in a lot of cases in places like Tirana, you can live a life in the same you'd live a life in the US. That you just work, pay money, get services, and there's no adventure in between. And the most adventurous thing that ever happens if there's a power outage or if the internet doesn't work. And especially with newer generations, people who are born after 2000, that's becoming more and more the norm in Tirana. But Tirana is almost a different country than the villages. So people would want to move abroad, live in a place where they don't speak the language, also because they like the adventure.
Would you say
Maybe,
that
yeah.
accounts for the million or so Albanians that have left, the younger Albanians, maybe? Would you assume it's that drive for adventure, or do you think it's more a drive for stability? Do people feel like they could maybe have a more stable life outside of Albania, or?
For the people, maybe for the ones that left at a younger age, it might be the call to adventure, let's say. But to people who left with the idea of creating a family and raising children there, then it would be the wanting stability. It's very, very hard to judge, though, because...
For sure. I guess, do you know anyone personally? Like friends of yours, maybe classmates?
I know a few, personally, and still it's hard to guess.
Really?
Because, that's something that's generally very deep, and people don't really know that kind of thing in an articulated manner. They know it much more. Yeah, even about themselves. So you need quite a lot of reflecting to figure that out. And by the time you've figured it out, you're 40 and you have 3 kids.
Yeah.
And you've grown in different directions to your high school friends. By the time you figure that stuff out, and it's hard to judge. Maybe ask me in 10 years if we ever manage to get a high school reunion back, a 20-year high school reunion, and then I'll ask people. Yeah. And maybe they'll give an answer.
So it sounds like people left just to explore the unknown, which would lean more towards the adventurous.
It's, more opportunities, and everyone says more opportunities, but if you analyze it a bit deeper, what does more opportunities mean? More adventure. In the end of the day, that's all that more opportunities is.
Yeah.
More adventure, which means, and traditionally in all mystic traditions, if you will, there's a dragon, and that dragon hoards gold. Because the big adventure is to kill the dragon, and then you get the gold and the princess and whatever. Yep. And that's a cultural universal almost. You have that in China, and you have that in Europe, and you have that with Nordic mythology, and you have that in Albania, and you have that everywhere, really. So I guess that's a cultural universal, that there's a call to adventure, and the whole reason behind that is that if you're good enough at the adventure part, you might get rewarded with the gold, with the figurative gold, of course. So,
or it's like accomplishing a goal, slaying the dragon.
Yeah,
the idea, like the metaphorical idea of slaying the dragon, of conquering. You know, I think in the modern day we probably say like climbing a mountain. Yeah, it's probably the metaphor.
Why would guys go to war back in the days? Because they got a ribbon.
They got a ribbon?
Yeah. For a piece of cloth this big. But that piece of cloth says that you're the kind of guy that goes to war and returns back. It says that you're hard to kill. It says that you're capable of dealing with tremendous stress.
But hold on, that doesn't mean that's why people went to war. That's just a thing that they got from going to war. They went probably because they had to, or they felt they had to, or they felt
know, because quite a lot of people in the US went to the Second World War even though they didn't have to. There were a lot of people that faked their ages just so they could go to war. They were 16 and they said, I'm 19, let me go to war.
Yeah.
And that's not 1 or 2 cases, that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of cases.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. It would obviously be very individualistic, but I think if you're a 16-year-old kid, it's World War II, your older brothers, your older friends, everyone's going to war. You know, the whole thing is about, like, this is the battle. You know, like, this is, like, everything.
This is the adventure.
Yeah, that is the thing.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, then obviously you can do other things, but I think a lot of people would feel compelled to do the big thing, which during World War II was, of course, that.
Which, the thing that you guys did great in your politics, really, until at least you guys went to the moon with the space race, was, and that was partially Kennedy with the way he spoke, but also even before Kennedy, that the US oriented that sense of adventure into we need to all work hard and we all are all a small part of the big machine that is moving
United
our
States.
country.
Yeah, exactly.
That is moving our country
Yeah.
forward to do such great things as to reach the moon.
Yeah. So
And that's also part of the adventure, and that's what good politics should be.
yeah,
at
well,
least.
it's like there's two sides of it. What you're saying with the ribbon, that's I'm going to go to war for the selfish reason because I want to be the guy that can go to war and can be strong. And then there's the other side of it, which is I want to go to
It's the
war
selfless
because
reason, yeah.
selfless reason for
Yeah,
the
to
other
protect
people.
my-
even if
yeah.
even if you're wrong, even if
Yeah.
even if you're lied to about why you're going
Yeah.
to war, I think that's what people are thinking.
Yeah,
in these
yeah.
situations is no, I'm protecting my family.
Yeah.
I'm doing a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm saving people.
Yeah, it's both.
Yeah, it's
And I wouldn't even call the first one the selfish reason, because why do you want to be the kind of guy that can? In many ways, you are learning how to deal with stress in that case. Even though you don't say it that way or articulate it that way, you're learning how to deal with stress. You're becoming a stronger, more competent, harder working human being. Why do you want to be that? Do you want to be that person because then you can make more money? Or do you want to be that person because you can approach that thing from the love angle as well? You could be that person because if you are that person, you're more capable of protecting your future wife and future kids. You're more capable of providing for them.
of course.
If shit hits the fan, then
Yeah.
you'll be a lot more cool, calm, and collected,
Yeah.
and will know what to do in that situation. So you can say that it's a selfish reasons, but I would say that the people that are actually successful in improving themselves generally don't do it for the selfish reasons. They do it still for the selfless reason,
And
because
maybe-
they'll be the one that can take care of everyone else.
Maybe a better way to say it is that it stems from an insecurity at first. Yeah, and I think that's any pursuit. Really, it's the drive to self-actualize, to prove ourselves, to make some sort of impact on what's happening here.
I don't know if insecurity is the correct word,
Maybe
because thing is, as a young guy, especially in a society like, for example, Albania, where you live with your parents or whatnot, you will see them getting older. And it's very pronounced, and you'll see your grandparents getting older. And you are very much confronted with that from a very young age with your grandparents, that they will get older, they will deteriorate from a health perspective, and then eventually they will die. And you know very quickly as a child, because children aren't stupid, that the same thing will happen to your parents, and you love your parents very much. So who do you want to be when that happens? Do you want to be the guy that can handle it? Or do you want to be the guy that isn't able to handle it? And in many ways, I would say that that is the role of a good father, to teach that to you, not in an articulated manner, of course, because then everyone would be Carl Jung, but not everyone is. But the role of the father is to teach you that in an embodied manner, by the way that he acts towards his family.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can seem harsh in many ways. Sometimes that can see what, I don't know what modern people call toxic or whatnot, but it can be misunderstood for that.
Well, how so? What do you mean by harsh?
Harsh in the sense that, no, you will not do stupid things. Because the father loves by setting rules in many ways. So, no, you will not do that. That's stupid. You'll kill yourself if you do that. No. Or
Okay.
you will not eat that. Or you will eat healthy. Or you will go and do the sport.
Yeah.
Or you will go and learn. You set the rules. You set the standards that need to be
Or you
enforced.
give instructions.
Yeah, well, you set standards, that's everything. And you set standards by your personal example in the very first place. You also set the standards by being the one that when your back is hurting and you cannot really lift out of your chair whenever your name is called, you just jump up and go and are ready to help.
But see now, I think that is touching into that toxicness.
Exactly, yeah, but in the end of the day, you don't just live for yourself, you live for the people that you love as well.
Well, but if you break that down, if everything you do is external, right? Then who's taking care of you? So there needs to be that reciprocation.
And that's why you
can't be jumping out of the chair every time you're going to break your back.
Yeah.
And then what use are you to anyone if you break your back? It doesn't make any sense.
And that's why you need a wise partner.
Yeah.
And especially as a man, men are generally, I guess, prone to overdoing things in all directions. And that's why you need the wise partner who says, well, I guess I can handle this one myself. I'll just not call him this time. He seems tired. I'll just make dinner and give him a massage or whatever. And in places where then that overdoing is going in the other direction, you also go as a partner and say, hey, you're doing something wrong here, let's figure this out. Because that's the whole purpose, I guess, of marriage, because people generally are blind to their own inadequacies. So you need someone else.
To see him.
To see him, yeah. And that's also a very good argument for till death do us part. Because if marriage is, oh, let's just get married and let's just play around together and then we're not married anymore, we'll do a divorce, whatever, and then we'll marry someone else, then you're not incentivized to go deep. And if it is till death do us part, then you're incentivized to say, I have another 50 years with this woman or this guy.
Gotta make it work.
Better fix this thing because this will ruin both our lives.
And now that's especially true for situations with these arranged marriages.
Yeah.
Because, arranged marriages are still exist in Albania.
Yeah, they're still a thing. Well,
less so.
A lot less so. To the point where it's in everyone's mind, because there's a lot of people that still live in an arranged marriage, but the vast majority, I would say, of marriages are not arranged anymore. And it's a guess, because how can you even collect the data for something like that?
For sure.
You cannot just do a Google Sheets thing and then collect the data.
Well,
maybe 90% are not arranged, or way more than 90 should be normal marriages. But there's still people that have arranged marriages. Most people's parents have arranged marriages.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the couples that we met, the older couples, were arranged.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because, I mean, one way of looking at it, I think the way that we look at it in the States is like, oh, this ancient way of doing things, how terrible, they didn't give anyone any choice, whatever, that's not what love is. Of course, there's all these arguments, which are valid. But then there's the other side of it too, where it's like, if I think maybe the most important part of the marriage thing, the relationship thing, is the commitment. And so it doesn't really matter what it is, but if you commit to it is what matters.
Yeah.
And so it could be anything. It could be anyone. You decide to commit to each other, and then you make it happen. And from there, then you can build a relationship, even if you might have been super different or might have never found each other, by yourselves, which I think is such a funny thing, right? It's like you just, make it work instead of trying to sift through all the options and find the perfect thing immediately. It's like, no, it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
You as a couple have to do that work.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important mentality to keep, regardless of arranged or in any relationship. It's
that's I think you hit the nail with that one, because of course arranged marriages have all that, the negative sides, but the thing that you are in this for life and you need to work on it, because no matter how much you love each other, if you don't work on it, you're not God, you are not faultless. If you don't work on yourself, you will never improve as a person, so you'll never be able to give more value to society.
And if you don't have enough tolerance for that other person to improve.
Yeah, and if you don't have enough tolerance for that person to improve, then they will not improve and you'll be a bitter, miserable person as well. So there should be a happy medium between that, and of course there's countless of families anywhere around the world that have found that happy medium. It's
Yeah.
not even something where you'd say that, oh, it's only the 1% or whatever. It's everyone is having a happy and good marriage that found it, which is probably more than half of the world. But you only see the bad things.
Maybe.
The news only shows the bad things. So we are inclined to think that most of everything is just bad and negative and whatever, and we get all the clickbait. But if you skip all that, yeah, 50% of marriages are divorced in the first year in the US, but if you look at it again, people who divorce once are more likely to divorce twice, and that includes a lot of marriages that are second, third, fourth marriages, that 50% number.
Okay.
So it's not 50%
So
of...
it's skewed.
Yeah, it's very skewed.
It's not 50% of people, it's
Yeah.
50% of marriages.
Yeah.
Because people who are divorced have more marriages, which is okay.
Yeah, and people who are divorced are also inclined to get more divorces in the future as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's normal for someone to have 4 or 5 divorces, and it's also very normal for someone to have
No.
just a normal,
Yeah.
stable family.
So so that person with like one marriage in their life,
Yeah.
you know, that's the one marriage that that worked, and then
Yeah.
the person that had 5 divorces,
Yeah.
that's 5 marriages that
Yeah.
didn't work. So that's
So
kind
it's not 50% of people; it's
Yeah.
50% of marriages.
Well, it's interesting in the world we are in now, like with Tinder and like dating online, in comparison. Because I was just thinking that's kind of like the polar opposite to the arranged
Yeah.
marriage, right? Where it's just
Yeah.
like this is your person is in front of you,
Yeah.
make it work. Versus like option,
Yeah.
option, and I can't imagine that's good for our brains collectively as a society.
I don't think it's good.
And I think because I think we had this conversation about options being good or bad.
Yeah.
And I was sort of hinting at maybe options aren't always better to have, because it takes you away from everything. Like for me it's like information overload. For like an ice cream shop, go to an ice cream shop, there's 30 flavors. I am going to instantly ask the person working there what their favorite 2 flavors are and get that, unless someone recommended me this specific flavor and that's why I'm there, because I don't want to have to think about it, right? And now the same thing goes for like we've commodified ourselves as people within relationships. We've commodified ourselves, and so now it's like every little thing, it's a detractor before even meeting the person, before even trying to work with the person. Because why would you work with the person? You can get a better template. You can try this other person, try this other
Yeah.
person, try this other person, try this other person. So you never even get to sink into it.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing, because obviously all of this is coming to Albania as well.
Yeah.
And I guess that's another big thing been talking about, like this. I guess if I try to describe the feeling of Albania, it's very strange in terms of how new it feels. It feels very adolescent, as you said, like it's an adolescent stage in development, but it's also super, super ancient.
Yeah.
Super ancient. And the mix of these two things kind of puts it in this interesting position, because it's like it could go in a million directions, right? Albania could go pretty much in any direction at this point, don't you think? Like, I guess I'll refine what I said. The conservative base of Albania, meaning the culture that has been preserved for thousands of years, I don't think that's going anywhere. But just in terms of this rapid development that's happening now, it's hard to predict where that will go.
It's very hard to predict, to the point where it's probably impossible, I would say. What I would say with the old culture is that during communism, if I wanted to put it into a metaphor, basically what we did is that we killed the father, the old culture, and we're living off the dead remains of the father until the end of communism. Or maybe even a bit later than that. And now we run out of remains. And now we're trying to figure out what's left, what was good, what wasn't good, and how to gain food again. and
in a metaphorical
in a
way.
metaphorical sense, of course, not the food for stuff
I just
to eat.
want to make sure we're on the same page.
In a sense where, you get the idea.
And culturally.
Culturally,
Yeah. But you do see it in the younger generation as well, that there is this excitement for the old culture. It's not something that is antiquated, you know.
Yeah.
It's old, but it's still exciting.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really important. Is it has to keep that fresh energy, otherwise people aren't going to want to associate with it. People aren't going to, think it's cool or whatever. But if it keeps that energy, then people will hold on to it and continue to carry it.
Yeah, there is excitement. Of course, there is mainly because we're a poor country. Even though there is quite a lot of excitement, because that is what unifies us in our identity, a lot of that old culture gets distorted a bit because we just don't have the money to keep it up. For example, some of the costumes that you saw, they have gold thread that you wouldn't even believe how much. Mm-hmm. That costs a lot of money.
Material, and then like hundreds of working hours.
Hundreds and hundreds of working hours.
Not like
by skilled masters. Where if you were to make that old costume in the old-fashioned way, it would probably be more expensive than a car. Because they can spit out cars at a rate of one every 20 seconds.
Well,
now.
And it's funny that you use that analogy because that's a big thing in Albania is the nice car.
Yeah.
Right. So it almost has switched into that way where it's, it is more effective just to have the fucking Mercedes or whatever the hell.
Yeah. Well, it's dating, I guess.
Dating.
So, that's
okay.
The Tinder thing.
Yeah.
And even in Tinder in the US, if you're the kind of guy that everyone knows you're rich, you'll get more matches.
Yeah.
Yeah, everywhere in the world, not just here.
Yeah.
So here's the same thing, you show off. Mm-hmm. And you show off with the expensive Merc.
And I think the lesson that needs to be learned all over the world with this flashiness thing is the more you put on the outer surface, you need to make sure that you're fulfilled on the inside as well.
Yeah.
I don't mean obviously as a person fulfilled, but your needs are met also, right?
Yeah.
Like just buying things to have the thing, to prove to the person that you have the thing, when you could be investing into your family, like this old way of thinking we're talking about, where first the money goes to your family and then to your brother's family and then to your cousin's family and whatnot.
Yeah.
Now that's going to a Mercedes, which is kind of sad. I mean,
well, I guess the shareholders of Mercedes are doing the old thing, where their money goes to them and then to their brothers' families. So.
Yeah, but it's just odd that we need to externalize that we have this externalized self-worth that needs to be validated.
Yeah.
And we're not getting it internally, and also from our family and from our extended family and community as it was in the past more so.
And I would even say that I have nothing against the flashiness bit if it's done for the correct purpose. So you have a lot of money, you make good money from your businesses, whatever, properties. Then you buy an expensive car because you have a bad back, or your father has a bad back, and you want your father to be comfortable, so you just buy him an expensive car because it has good massaging seats and air conditioning seats and whatever. Mm-hmm. That's still flashy. Yeah. That's still a very flashy car. It's still a $200,000 Mercedes.
Yeah.
But you don't buy it because you want to show off to people. You buy it because you want your dad to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Or you want to be comfortable yourself when you're going on a family trip. Mm-hmm. And that's still flashy.
Yeah.
And people will still see it that way. And by looking at someone passing by in an expensive car, there's no way to know.
Yeah.
Or you buy that Porsche, it's flashy, but you like driving a lot and you go to the mountains every Friday. Mm-hmm. And you go to the track every Sunday. Mm-hmm. That's still a flashy car, and by looking at it, you might think, oh, this idiot with the Porsche, he's buying it for whoever. he's actually buying it for himself because he's an enthusiast and he loves machines.
Of course, yeah.
So that can be misinterpreted in many ways.
Definitely, but I would say, I mean, wouldn't you say there's probably a majority of the cases are not of utility, right?
I don't know. Might be.
Okay.
Might be. And
well, just at the rate that it's seen,
I
right?
would,
Like you can't say for any exact car driving by why that
Yeah.
person bought that car, but seeing the abnormal, again, these contrasts that exist in
Yeah.
Albania, the very nice cars on the very shitty streets,
yeah.
and that contrast sort of being in a lot of, you can see that in a lot of
Yeah.
places. So I feel like that's indicative of maybe something shared or something greater, and so yeah, that's where I'm guessing that maybe for at least a plurality of people, there's this need to be validated in some way or another.
Yeah.
That maybe wasn't there before.
I would say, and I'll tie this into a point a bit later on, that you could maybe even use it as an indicator to the health of the society. So if flashiness is for validation purposes, or if it's because you like that kind of stuff and you enjoy that kind of thing that you're buying, and the more it's tending towards you enjoy that kind of thing, the healthier a society, and the more it's tending towards the flashiness just to show off so other people will see me and I get value and I get dopamine because other people are jealous of me, the worse the society is.
Yeah.
And there's actually, by the way, something that economists call the lipstick effect. The worse an economy is, the more the sale of cosmetics increases.
Really?
Which is very counterintuitive, because you'd think the economy is terrible, why would anyone waste money on lipstick? When actually, the worse the economy is, the more people buy cosmetics. Maybe it's because of they want to be validated in another way because they don't have the purchasing power that they used to have before. They don't have such a good life, so they want to get that dopamine in some other way. Maybe it's because they see the only way out of their life, women at least see the only way out of their life to marry someone with money. Could be something else entirely, but it is quite known that that happens.
Or it's just like and I have no idea, but maybe it's just a way to escape yourself, right? I mean, makeup in a certain way is covering up what's there. Of course, not in any case it can enhance what's there. I don't know how to use makeup exactly, but just thinking about it, like it's sort of covering up what's there. And I guess in a similar economic situation, I'm assuming alcohol sales would be up too, maybe like in a downturn market, alcohol sales and other things like that would rise. And that's just interesting that cosmetics would correlate with that. That says something about cosmetics. Yeah. That they're related to.
Well, what do cosmetics
substances.
do? When you think about it, what do cosmetics do? And it all boils down to increasing your sexual marketplace value. And yeah, it's not very kind to say value for a person, but in the end of the day, that's what it is. Why is the basis of all cosmetics red lipstick and red lipstick and red cheeks? Because that's
blood.
Yeah. When does blood come to the face? When women are sexually aroused. That's why women put red lipstick, even though they know it in an embodied and not an articulated way in many ways. Women all the time, they say that they put lipstick on for themselves to feel good, but they never put lipstick on when they're at home just chilling and not wanting to go out. So if they want to feel good, why do they want to feel good? Only in places where there's potential mates. So that's what makeup is and has always been. A way to increase your sexual marketplace value. And that's also what expensive cars are for men.
Yeah.
Because you're showing that you are the guy that has resources. You're showing that you are the guy that has no problem, even in a bad economy, to provide for your family, to provide food for your family.
Yeah.
And yeah, the world and humanity shouldn't you could make the argument at least that people shouldn't be in such a bad economic state where all they think about is providing food and shelter. But guess what? That's how many people live in the world.
Well, you know what's funny? It's not unnatural. It's very natural. Like look at flamingos, look at
Yeah.
birds, look at
Yeah.
fish. It's
Yeah.
it's the male always being flashy.
Yeah.
It's just funny how in humans we do that with objects. Right?
Well,
we don't have these
Crows
beautiful
do it
feathers.
with objects, by the way, with shiny things. That's
Well-
why crows like silver and shiny things. That's why they steal spoons.
Really?
Yeah.
Crows.
Crows, yeah.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah. So it's not just humans, I guess.
But I guess
Maybe primates do the same thing, non-human primates. Have to
Okay.
check on that.
But I guess from most of nature, that it's a little bit of a different thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting, you know, because it seems like it's flipped in terms of with humans where it's the women that get more like with the beautiful dresses and whatnot. And I think in our culture, I think men dress more simply and women dress more flowery in general, right? Whereas like animals, birds, fish, whatever, it's like genetically like the males are prettier. They're more like beautiful, like more sparkling and catch the attention.
Well, maybe that might be our way of interpreting it, because I would say that in humans, the way that women dress in a sexy manner would be to show their childbearing hips, for example, to show that they're good candidates for the man to reproduce with. And the men do the same thing. They show that they're good candidates for the woman to reproduce with. And traditionally, in most, at least primates, the male is the one that builds the house, the nest, and the woman is the one that takes care of the children. And that's what most monkeys do as well, by the way. That most mammals do. Women feed children, men go to war, in a sense. So, yeah, do you want to be the one that's able to go to war in a financial sense?
Yeah.
And do you want to show that off?
Yeah.
And as a woman, wouldn't you be wise to select a partner, especially if we're talking a monogamous partner to the end of your life? Would you be wise to select a partner that can provide and protect and build a strong home? Or would you be wiser to select a partner who's fun, like the guys on Tinder, that are pretty useless for everything else, but they're fun? And as a man, would you be wise to select a partner who is more likely to give you healthy, fertile offspring? Or would you be wiser to select someone who's just fun to hang around with, like Tinder?
Of
Again.
course,
Yeah.
of course, you want the both worlds.
Yeah.
Right. You would want your partner to be the person you can have fun with and you can
Yeah.
trust and
Yeah.
rely on. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the war thing again. I had this like sort of thought earlier. Like, I think there is something that starts a fire in people about being protective or defending what's there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, for all of mammal existence, you know, it's for all of life. You have to defend life.
Yeah.
You know, and that is instinctually we have a lot. I think we have a big energy draw. We have a big fucking vat of energy to draw from in those situations. But it's interesting how I think that energy throughout history and continuing to the modern day, of course, is used to attack. We need to protect, so we attack. That's sort of this like dichotomy that like these our nations have been using against us, right? But because there is like this sense of fulfillment and goodness in protecting, but that's externalized, and it's kind of it's a very evil thing, really.
Well, we need to protect the world from Nazism, so we need to attack the Nazis at Normandy. That's the healthy way of looking at it. The unhealthy way is we need to protect our financial interests, so we need to attack Libya when they're trying to go off the US dollar. Yeah. That's the toxic part of it. But the non-toxic part of it would be these guys are pretty much killing everyone and they're not good, so we better send our men to die in war so that the entire world doesn't end.
Yeah, but it's like, is that true? Is it true that it will extend? I mean, I'm not talking about World War II. I'm just talking in general. Is it true that even if, let's hypothetically say there's some sort of evil force somewhere that is doing something, is it even reasonable to assume that that would infect the world? I mean, that seems ridiculous.
Oh yeah. And not only is that evil force there, it's some of the most real things that exist in Earth. It's just as real as matter that you're touching. It's just not real in a way that you would think, and it's not like this bottle real or this cup real, but it's real in the same way that numbers are real. Mm-hmm. We have 2 cups here, but do you see a number 2 anywhere? Mm-hmm. But the number 2 is real, right? It exists, the number. Even though it doesn't just exist as an object, it's something you can touch. And it's the same thing in many ways for that big, strong, evil force. And if you look at it from how the entire idea of the devil was developed in human consciousness, it started with all the different demons that all did different kinds of things, and then humanity, if you will, started realizing that it all kind of has the same source. And that got distilled and distilled and distilled to the point where now it's the devil, Satan, Shaitan, call him whatever you like. And that's very, very real. And you see the devil working through people, and if you're paying enough attention, you'll see it even in everyday life. And when societies get skewed to the point where they turn into full-on dictatorships, that's also the work of the devil in many ways.
Where do you think that comes from? Do you think that comes from I mean, you're saying that it's a thing that exists, but what creates it? Is it pain? Is it a lack of needs being met? Is it a lack of love? What is this force?
All of them together. So, well, technically, I mean, but definitionally, it would be everything bad, right?
Yes, but I guess I'm gonna maybe be a little bit strict in the definition because I think it might be interesting to think of it in this way. It's like cold and hot, right? Cold exists, but it's really just heat and less heat.
Yeah.
Right? So I would apply the same thing to evil. I'm inclined to believe that evil doesn't exist, and that really what's being seen is a lack of love. And maybe that's me just being optimistic, but through that frame, I think we can solve more problems. Because that way, instead of looking at something and dividing them, that person's evil. That's different from me. It's, no, that person's a person. They want to be loved. They want to meet their needs. They want to live a life that is fulfilling to them in some way. And they don't think that's can be accomplished, or they don't know how to accomplish, and they're lost in this way or that way. And through that frame of mind, I think we can work with each other better.
Well, I would phrase whatever the thing that you're trying to say quite a bit differently. And I would say, the typical biblical ideas that we are all sinners, and that only God is perfect. And up to the point, actually, when there's this story in the Bible that the man goes to Jesus and says, and addresses him with "My good Lord." And Jesus, who is basically God in human form come to ground, or if you look at it from the Islamic perspective, would be almost the perfect man and one of the most revered prophets. He doesn't reply with, "Oh, I'm good, and how can I help you?" or anything. His reply is, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good." So even God in human form would not be perfect. And in that case, what chance do we mere normal, mortal human beings have? We are all sinners, and the idea is that me, you, everyone else, we are all sinners, and we need the guidance so that we can do the best that we possibly can to carry the heaviest burden we possibly can and still somehow crawl uphill towards the city of God, if you want to call it this way.
Okay.
So God if you want to use the medieval definition, summum bonum, or the sum of all that is good, that would be one of the many medieval ways of trying to define God, the sum of all that is good.
Yeah.
And if you are stumbling towards that, that's basically the purpose of your whole life.
Or maybe a different way to look at that is to let that exist within us, or to embody that, or to invoke that within us, to invoke that goodness within us.
Yeah.
And yes, it is not us, but that energy can be embodied through us, and that energy can flow through us.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the idea of Jesus is.
Yeah, that's
is
the
to
idea,
let that, to bring that energy into the physical form and to share that, to shine that light out. I think that's the whole idea.
To let the Holy Spirit speak and act through you, basically.
But then having the humility to know that it's not you, or to separate it.
Having the humility to know that this is not me.
Because then that's when it turns into the devil, I think.
Yeah.
Or that's when it turns into ego, because then you can manipulate that for what
pride
you want.
is what took one of the most important angels and turned him into a devil in the end of the day. And pride is basically the opposite of humility. And you need to have that humility to recognize that you're just the filthy sinner that's
I don't know if I would
not
look at it.
capable of being perfect, but at least you need to try to do your best. And every time you sin, you need to repent. That's the whole idea of Christianity in a way. And what is repentance? That you recognize your sin and you articulate it in a way that you recognize it and you know exactly what it is. And then you take steps to improve yourself so that you don't do that in the future.
I think it's separating the actions from yourself, so that way it doesn't hurt when you're judging the actions. You can judge the actions as actions and understand that those aren't actions I want to continue making.
It will hurt, and I would say it should hurt.
Yes. But that is the separating from the action, because we associate ourselves with what we do and with how we think and with all these things, and to break away from all these things we consider ourselves, consider to be us, and to let some of it die, to let parts of ourselves die off, basically.
Yeah.
That is what hurts. But from the other side, it feels much better.
When God sent Adam and Eve out of heaven, he put as a guard of heaven, he put a cherub with a flaming sword that turns in all directions. And that basically means that if you want to enter paradise, or if in a more modern tongue you would say, if you want to be a good person, you would have to cut away every single part of you that is not worthy of being that good person, that's good enough to enter paradise. And that's what the flaming sword does. It cuts and it burns and it kills. And you have to kill that off. And that's why I say that it has to be painful. You don't learn without the pain anyway. Most people don't learn. You tell a child the fire is hot. The child will still try to play with the fire and get burned. And that's how humans are. They will do whatever that sin is that they do, or that bad thing. And the whole point of repenting of your sins would be to understand that I am the guy that's also capable of doing this thing. I just did, and I need to change, and it'll be very hard to change, but I'll still do it, even though it's very hard, and even though it might need killing off of a very dear part of myself. I will still do it because that part is incorrect, because I need to be a good person, so that's what I'll do. And that's a very big problem with the Western world, I see now, that many people read history books and they think they understood history books. And you read a book about the Nazis and you read the book from the perspective of the victim. But you also need to read the book from the perspective of the perpetrators. You need to think, okay, it can be a useful exercise to think of yourself as the pregnant Jewish woman who got shot in the back of the head. But it's a much more useful exercise to think of yourself as the 45-year-old German man who had grown up before the Nazis even came and was a 40-something-year-old, well-formed individual who worked as a teacher and was then recruited into a police battalion and was then tasked with shooting pregnant, naked Jewish women in the face in a ditch in winter. Mm-hmm. You also have to think of yourself as that guy. Yeah. Because if you think of yourself as that guy, then you are capable of at least of recognizing that part of yourself, and then you know at least what you're fighting against. Because if you only look at yourself from the point of view of the pregnant Jewish lady, or even worse, of the baby that's inside the pregnant Jewish lady, the most innocent of innocent creatures,
the most innocent, benevolent thing you can be.
Then you'll never learn.
Yeah, it's important to see our shadows.
Yeah, it's important, very important to see our shadows. And it's dark and it's hard to do. But unless you do that, what will actually happen if you don't do that is that when the next dictatorship comes, you'll be very likely to be that guy with the rifle.
Yeah. Well, and I think the way that I deal with it are those darker parts of myself. It's recognizing they're there, but then it's also, I think, not falling into the judgment of that, of those behaviors, or of those feelings, or of that identity. It's not judging it and putting it down, or painting it in a bad light. It's giving it warmth, actually. They're giving it understanding. Like the parts of me that want to, react by yelling, for example, or react in anger to something. Someone beeps a car horn right in front of me, and I want to fucking kick the car. That thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not being like, no, that's stupid. I can't act in that way. It's accepting and understanding that is a part of me, and that part has a purpose, and that purpose is trying to serve me. And it's not always going to work in the correct way, but at least just acknowledging that it's that feeling is justified, or that it's I don't know, just being inviting to that feeling and letting it in, not identifying with it, but letting it in, giving it warmth, and then it goes away, instead of trying to reject it, because then I think it grows.
What I would say is that at least in my point of view, at least, would be that you need to take that and take the flaming sword, metaphorically again, and that has a purpose, of course. And you shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And that aggressiveness that you have, you should cut away very precisely the parts that are not important to yourself, your loved ones, and society as a general. But then you have to keep that aggressiveness, because one day that car will not be beeping. It'll be a car that spontaneously bursts into flames, and you could be the guy that breaks the window and gets the random dude in the car out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's aggressiveness as well, by the way. And that's the same kind of aggressiveness. Running into a burning building or car. Yeah. That's the same kind of aggressiveness, and you have to keep it, and you have to cultivate it in a way where it's manifested in a productive capacity.
Mm-hmm. I think where I'm at in life right now, I think I need to nurture my compassionate side more. I'm feeling a lot more benefit from that energy, from having that energy. And I think my angry side of me has just been, the opposite of a servant to me, and in my past. So I would say, yeah, maybe I do need to balance it out more. But for now, I'm more inclined toward that more compassionate side.
Well, when they asked Jesus why he was dining with all the moneylenders and all the prostitutes and the tax collectors, his answer was that when there's a doctor, who does he hang around with? With healthy people or with sick people? He's needed there with sick people. And maybe, I don't know, but maybe that's your way of saying that you want to help other people via that compassion. But then again, he was Jesus, he wasn't very easily tempted. So you also have to recognize that negative side of you and know it well enough so that when you hang around with people that are not as good as you would like them to be, that's why you're hanging around with them. So via your compassion, you help them grow in a certain way. You have to be that kind of guy that doesn't get taken down by them, because that's a real risk. And in the same way that you speak to their soul to grow and to get better via that compassion, they also speak to your soul via that dark part that they do have within them. So you have to have your dark side, if you will, developed to the point where you don't fall victim to that, where you're able to recognize that this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Either I will fight it this way, or I will not let that touch me, or in the worst case, I will remove myself from the situation so that at least one more person doesn't get infected.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like trying to warm up a refrigerator.
Yeah. Yeah. And you need to be able to have that part of you develop to a point where at least you can recognize what is happening. Because if you don't, then you'll fall victim to it. It's very easy to do if you don't recognize what's happening.
Within whatever warmth you have within yourself, you have to make sure that is, it's not just there, but it's growing.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it will be dispersed. That energy will be dispersed. But if you're constantly creating it within yourself, then you have that opportunity.
And you do create it by helping other people, by the way. That's probably the most important mechanism of how you create it. But only if you see, well, I guess it's all dopamine in the end. It's only when you see progression towards a valued goal that you feel better about yourself and everything. And if that goal is to help someone else and lift them up and enable them to do something worthwhile of their own, then if you see progress in that person, you'll feel good. By the way, that's what technically would be the fatherly spirit, encouragement. You encourage that person to be better via compassion, and sometimes via setting rules, and that's the whole point of rules, so that you don't let that dark side manifest itself, and so that you teach the other person about that dark side as well, so that they know how to recognize it, so that there in the end there's two people of you who via compassion want to make other people better.
Well, what do you think about the goals that aren't consciously set, about the dopamine, as you said, that we get not when we accomplish something consciously, but when we get a hit of dopamine that we didn't expect because there's something good or something good happened or to whatever effect it is. I think those are the interesting things too. That's part of the adventure, right?
That's
part of the adventure
stuff you need to explore.
Yeah.
Because you're responding positively to that thing, whatever it is. Why are you responding positively? It can be for all the right reasons, in which case you would probably want to get your head down and work in that direction. Or if it's for all the incorrect reasons, because of cocaine, for example, that gives a big dopamine spike.
Yeah.
If that's for the incorrect reason, you need to be good enough to understand that and say, no, this is giving me a dopamine spike, but then in the very end, the spike goes way below baseline and then it goes to normal again. I don't want that. I want to be above baseline as much as possible and not go below. How do you fix that? Either by being high on cocaine all the time, which only works to a certain extent.
It only works if you have as much money as certain people.
As Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't work because then you get then it gets normalized and then the dopamine returns to baseline anyway.
Yeah.
Or you do that by finding another goal that's actually worthwhile, and you pursue that. And I would say that maybe your dopaminergic response to achievements would be an indicator to which goals are actually valuable to you.
Exactly. Yeah, it's what do you have fun with?
Yeah.
What are you in, like, what turns you on? What sets you on fire?
Yeah, what sets you on fire? Yeah, I agree with that one. I wouldn't say what you have fun with, because I don't like this whole idea of fun that you guys have in the West. Maybe I'm very boring, whatever. I don't care anymore.
But don't you have fun with what you do?
Not fun in the hedonistic, let's have fun and get drunk and party way.
Yeah, but that's not what, there's many types of fun.
Yeah.
Going, being in nature, taking hikes, connecting with people, learning new things, that's all very fun.
Yeah, that's all very fun. And that's why I said you guys in the West, and I don't mean it in a way to degrade you or anyone else, but the idea in the West that you get with social media, with media in general, really, is that fun is what, I don't know, Pete Diddy is doing.
Or fun is what you can buy.
Yeah, fun is what you can buy.
That's the idea that we have in the West.
Well, I don't know. Fun is Burning Man. But is it really fun? Just getting so high and drunk that you don't remember a thing? Fun is going to a party in Miami.
Yeah,
is it really fun?
I think those types of funs actually get boring.
Yeah.
It's like you can do that for a week.
Yeah, because it's empty.
But the reason why that market is there is because there's so much of the other side of it's like you said, America is you work and you get the thing, you get the money and you buy the thing, and then you work and you get the thing, whatever. But that's a very flatline existence that I think many Americans, we struggle with mentally, is this state of existence. And that complete, chaos or that letting loose or that release it's that demand is there just because I think we as a culture need it. But in general, I think that probably the healthier the culture, the less you would need to disconnect from the world.
Yeah.
And the more you would, with whatever you're doing, be connecting. And you can do that with whatever. And it could be just with the same things. It still could be like you're going onto a desert and you're burning stuff and you're taking drugs, but you're doing it for a different reason. And I don't know I haven't been to Burning Man. I don't know what it is exactly. I know about it, but I wouldn't know enough to say if it's just people just taking whatever drug imaginable to get fucked up, or if it's people trying to connect more with who they are and the world they're around. I'm sure there's both types of people because it's big enough where you get both types of people. But I think if that change continue, that change will be made, the healthier we are and the more that we enjoy our lives, so that when we go out and party or at night, we're not escaping from our life.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's a big proportion of people that travel to escape, and I shouldn't say this as someone working in the travel industry, but why do you want to escape your life? Isn't that the biggest indicator that your life's a bit shit, that you want to escape it? Once a year on a two-week vacation? Mm-hmm. But another thing I would say with American culture and seeing it as an outsider who doesn't really have enough information because I hadn't lived there, is that you guys want things to happen quickly. And you guys also want this connection with yourself, which in many ways can also be called wisdom. You want that to happen quickly. So what do? You go to Brazil and take psychedelics because it happens quickly with psychedelics. Or you could dedicate your life to studying, to praying, and to working. And in that way, prayer works. And if you know how to do it, it works. It's basically therapy.
It's magic, yeah.
No, it's not magic.
You wouldn't call it magic?
No, because that's the problem that a lot of people in the West have. They think of God as this, mystic, magical sugar daddy in the sky that you pray for things. You don't pray for things.
No. Of course, I'm not saying that you pray for things, but the other way of looking at it is magic. Like that, what people call magic, so other people call prayer, other people call manifestation, other people, call cause and effect. I don't know, right? There's a million ways to label it. But I guess I think it's interesting through the lens of magic, because I guess that's more exciting to me than my connotation of prayer, at least the connotation that I grew up with growing up Catholic. They just seem very boring, right? But of course it's not boring. You're connecting with an energy and you're creating something.
Well,
you're helping to create something.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you like, you could call it magic. I think we'll not agree with that part, because what I would call prayer would be sitting at the side of your bed at 3 a.m. in the morning when you cannot really sleep because something is bugging you, and then just digging deeper and saying, all right, why can I not sleep? What the hell am I doing wrong? Mm-hmm. And then you go deeper and then you say, okay, of all these things that I might be doing wrong, what is something that I could fix, that I have the capability to fix? And if you do that often enough and long enough, then you will receive a revelation.
Well, you're invoking a power to go through that cleansing procedure of going through and looking at what's in our mind. If you do that with prayer, you're invoking a power to do that, to help you through that process.
But you don't do that by mixing different ingredients in a pot over a fire and saying spells in a language that you don't understand. You do that by examining your life and yourself and your decisions and your inadequacies, where it hurts the most.
Or well, okay, let's take another example. Praying for someone to get better from an illness, right? If you could draw a correlation between those two things, you might as well call that magic. And again, I'm not saying that to connotate it with anything else that you might be thinking of. I'm doing that because for me that communicates effectively the meaning of, like, a miracle, you could call it as well, right? That's what that becomes, because you're invoking some sort of energy to do something in a way that you're not going to completely understand, but maybe you can feel it in a certain sense.
Yeah, but I would always tend to the conclusion that everything that ever happens is my fault or your fault or anyone's fault in that sense. So even in the sense of praying for someone you dearly love to get better from an illness, if you dig deep enough, you might end up and say, yeah, but if I had more connections or more money, I could afford better healthcare for them.
Yeah.
And that's also a valid resolution to the problem. And
to get more money?
In a way, yeah, money is a tool. Yeah. Or to get more connections.
Yeah.
So that you ask who's the best doctor and you can get the best doctor for them, even if it doesn't cost more. Mm-hmm. Or so you can find another solution. But
But
In the end of the day, you are responsible for everything everyone does.
But do you think our minds have a power in that way? Do you think by imagining things, it can bring it into material?
If you have enough faith, yeah, but who does? I mean, if, as the saying goes, if you have faith the size of the grain of sand, you can move mountains. Do you? The mountain's still there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you? Are you enlightened enough to use another term? And if you are Mother Teresa, maybe, but how much work does it take for you to become that person? And yeah, if you are a saint, maybe you can via prayer.
But what is a saint? Who is a saint?
Someone who is enlightened enough to, or rather strong in their faith to the point where they can do miracles via their faith.
Okay.
Again, if you have faith the size of a grain of sand, you can move mountains. And even the very best of saints we can judge through history still haven't moved mountains. They've healed the sick, which is great, it's amazing, but there can be more and more and more, and there's seemingly no end to it.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like you could have all the faith, and then you'd need the reason why to move the mountain too.
Yeah.
Right.
Look around, you'll have enough reasons.
Well, I guess.
And the mountain is, of
been,
course, metaphorical.
I know, but you've been speaking a lot about biblical metaphors, so I think the metaphor of Moses and the separating the sea.
Separating the sea, yeah.
That's very similar, right?
Yeah.
He didn't just do it just to be like, look at this cool trick. It was because they were running from an army. So I think there needs to be some sort of necessity to it as well.
Yeah, of course.
Or urgency. I don't know. Or there needs to be. It needs to be happening. Or I don't know. It can't just be a whim thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you cannot just say, oh, just for fun, I want that mountain to disappear. But on the other hand, we have earth-moving equipment by now. So, I don't know, is it a manifestation of faith to dig a tunnel through a mountain in the Swiss Alps that's 40 kilometers long?
Yeah.
In many ways it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a different technique, right?
Yeah, it's a different technique, but if you boil it down, it's still a manifestation of faith in a way. You still have faith that the workers will do their thing for this funny colored paper. And they have faith that if they do the right thing, they will get rewarded. And everyone that drives through it in a train has faith that the guy in the train is doing his job.
But I mean, in that scenario too, you also don't need faith, right? Like, do you?
I think you do, actually.
Well, I guess there's the other way of thinking about it, where it's you don't need faith if you know. But
how do you know?
See, but that like if yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, how do you know that the pilot of the plane
That's
isn't
the thing. You can't know for sure that you know anything.
Yeah.
100%. But
so you
I
have
think
to have faith.
Yeah, see, that's where it just gets definitionally tricky. It just gets definitionally tricky because I think faith can also maybe be the encouragement of ignorance in a certain sense. It can maybe discourage curiosity. If we pursue knowledge, right? So now I'm sort of flipping the thing here. If we pursue knowledge, then we have to naturally be questioning what's happening.
Yeah.
And if we're accepting everything, then you're not going to get closer to knowledge. So I would say it's not that I know anything, it's just that I know more than I knew. And that process can continue.
Yeah.
But it only can continue if I pursue knowledge, not faith, right? So it's also, I think it's important to hold that thing as well.
Yeah, look, of course you should pursue knowledge, but you shouldn't pursue knowledge as a means to an end. Knowledge isn't God in the sense, so you shouldn't pursue knowledge for the sake of knowledge. Let's put it this way, you should pursue knowledge so that you can share that knowledge with anyone else.
Exactly.
And so that you improve as a person.
Exactly.
And then you become the person who can help other people more.
Exactly.
The people you love, and your immediate family is always the first. But yeah, then it goes down and down and down, depending on how much you're capable of producing in the end of the day.
But yeah, you can accomplish things through many different
Yeah.
multitudes of mindsets.
Yeah.
I guess, do you subscribe to any particular religion?
I am a Christian Orthodox, I would say, or rather Albanian Orthodox. That's the official name of the church, of the religion. But yeah, it's Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodoxy in general.
Okay. Is that how you were raised as well?
Not strictly.
Gotcha.
My grandparents were more believing, my parents a bit less.
Okay.
And I tend to be a bit more than my parents.
Okay. So is it something you found yourself attracted to more so? Or like it doesn't sound like it was forced upon you. Did you sort of naturally go in that direction?
Yeah, well, it wasn't forced upon me entirely. And if you would ask the 18-year-old me, I'd probably be the dickhead guy saying, oh, God doesn't exist and all that crap. And making fun, because 18-year-olds are that way, I guess. But the older you grow, the wiser you grow. And you learn things and you see things. And once you see and once you know that the devil actually exists, if there's negative numbers, there have to be positive numbers. It's just math. It's just counterbalance. There can be no evil without good.
Yeah.
So God needs to exist. And then again, you can also see, and that's maybe the advantage of living in a society like Albania. You can see the spirit of, you can see the devil working through someone, and you can see God working through the very same person, which is incredibly weird to see in different actions. But once you know what to look for, you'll see it, and I don't know how to articulate that, because I don't know, maybe I need another 20 years to learn how to articulate that.
But it's interesting. So your belief in God came from first the understanding that the devil exists, and then logically, if the devil exists, God has to exist?
Not necessarily. I would say the articulated part
Okay.
of that belief would come in that way. But then again, mountain is still there, haven't moved it, so how much faith do I truly have?
Yeah, but like you're moving your own mountains, right?
Maybe I could do better, or rather I could. I know I could. And I don't want to go into details because that's not the topic of this discussion, of course.
You're fine.
But,
you're fine. But it's interesting to think like that is for all of us to decide.
Yeah.
Is where we put that energy.
Yeah, that is for all of us to decide. But I would say that you would be probably very wise if you put this energy into improving yourself and working, basically to be better and good, to try and be as good as you possibly can,
and I think
as
with
you're
that,
possibly capable.
with that is also improving the definition of what is good.
Yeah.
Because that constantly needs to be refined.
Yeah.
If you just like nail down what the definition of good is, like I think you can do more harm. I think more harm can be done by...
Humanity has been trying to nail that down since there's been speech. And I'm not gonna try to nail it down here because I'm not gonna do a good enough job. Of course I'm not, because how do you even start that?
Well, and I think
task,
it's
let alone
important too
accomplish?
to sort of figure it out for ourselves. Like, I mean, of course, that's what religions do. Religions are there to say this is what's good and this is what's bad. But I think that the most value is in finding it for yourself. And what you were saying about being an adolescent and going the opposite way from religion, I think that's a very common experience with everything in adolescence, right? And you learn what your parents do, you are in love with your parents, you're in love with your grandparents, everything that they do is perfect, and then it flips and everything they do sucks and you hate everything you do. And then maturing, I think, is finding that medium between your self-identity that you carve and everything around you and all the information that's there. And that reminds me again what you said about Albania being in this adolescent stage where coming out of communism, flying into capitalism, and sort of seeing like what will be made of that. But it is your generation and the younger generation as well. But I guess the biggest thing is people need to stay here. People need to like move here. But if they move here, they need to learn the language and actually become Albanian. That would be the only way to do it. You can't half-ass moving to Albania.
You can't half-ass move into Albania, not really, because some people know, but you'll never be part of society, of course, and to the point where it's so extreme that I could probably move to the Alps because I know the dialect good enough, but I don't speak it good enough, so I'll always be the foreigner.
The Albanian Alps. So even
even within the country, I'll always be the foreigner there, and I'll be accepted and everything, but I'll still kinda not be one of them.
But even
and I'll be one of them when shit happens. And
when you prove yourself.
No, well, even when you prove yourself, but still, you're not there. They are family there. And traditionally in Albania, by the way, you don't marry within the village because everyone in the village is family. So it was forbidden to marry in your village. You had to marry someone from outside of your village, which reinforces the need for arranged marriages, of course, because
how are you going to meet someone?
How are you going to meet someone if you never leave your village? But
it makes sense, bring new genetics in.
It's against inbreeding. Albania is one of the few European countries that ever had any regulation against this.
Because it was just a cultural understanding.
Because it was a cultural understanding, and we had the kanun, the old rule book, if you will, and it was there. And when it was written, it was also included in there in written form. But even before that, there's very little evidence of inbreeding with Albanians, less than a lot of other European places. So, like kings would do, for example, in Europe, where everyone ended up stupid.
With deformed faces.
Like people still do in quite a lot of places in the world.
It's this weird idea of preserving a bloodline. Instead of having a healthy
well,
family.
you do preserve a bloodline by having as many children as possible and having good...
When I say preserving a bloodline, I don't mean passing on genetics. I mean for this weird thing of keeping this like whatever blood crap. This nobility thing, God touched blood or whatever this idea is.
But then again, you can still marry a princess from another tribe. It doesn't have to be your tribe. It's just people being stupid, I guess. Because the Queen of England is German, or was German. You can still marry some nobility from Germany, can marry some nobility from Spain or Russia. Like Catherine the Great, who married the Russian king, Tsar, before becoming Tsar herself, for example.
But I guess in Albania it's interesting because you were saying you're one of the most homogenous countries, but you haven't had problems with inbreeding. So that takes
was very
something
strictly
that takes
enforced.
some. Okay. So you need to have a system for that.
You need to have a system for that, and of course nowadays in business language everything is systematized and everything just happens by itself in a magical way. But back then we didn't call it system. No one did. It's just rules, and this is
tradition.
The law,
the
traditional law, and you follow it. And there's not even an or else behind, because no one sees the need not to follow it.
That would be we're right around 2 hours. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I got a bus to catch here in a little
Yeah,
bit. What time
you,
is
you
it?
do have a bus to catch, and you have 45 minutes to catch the bus. So
Okay, yeah, we better wrap it up.
yeah,
but
better wrap it up.
thank you so much, Loren. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, a pleasure meeting you.
Maybe we can do
and
it
a
again
pleasure
sometime.
hosting you. So yeah, of course.
Thank you so much, man.